I want to talk about two guys that have yet to make a decision. And it's, I saw somebody on the board today talk about how these are the two guys on the recruiting board that you need to nail, right? And as far as coming back are concerned, it's Isaiah Foskey and Jarrett Patterson. So let's talk about Isaiah Foskey first. He's kind of the big one, and I really feel like based on some of his social media and some of the things that we're hearing, I think a decision is coming sooner rather than later. But Brian put an intel piece up on the board last night where, he's hearing everything. Going, staying, it's all over the place. And there's really no definitive answer right now until he comes out with one. So I'll ask you, Ryan, what do you think? It's a two-part question. What do you think he should do? And what do you think he will do? Because those might be two completely different answers.
I think what I'm kind of hearing is that it is a true 50-50 split decision right now. Like, I don't think anybody truly knows, which makes sense why for Brian, he's kind of hearing a bunch of different things. Like, it's not a consistent kind of answer. What I think he should do, I think that he should return. And that's not just the Notre Dame fandom in me, just kind of what I talked about with the depth of the wide receiver room. The defensive end, the edge class in 2022 is stacked, man. Like, it just is. People want to talk about Kayvon Thibodeau out there in Oregon. They want to talk about Aiden Hutchinson in Michigan. But then we're dealing with guys like Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, who's going to go top 50. We're talking about George Karlaftis, who could go top 10, top 15, potentially. Then we're talking about guys like Isaiah Thomas from Oklahoma and Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State and
the Thibodeau
kid. Yeah, there's so many dudes, and this is an exceptionally deep class. And we have guys on so many teams that have kind of taken their step up this year as far as, kind of their trajectory. And it's just, in my opinion, it is the deepest class in the 2022 NFL draft. So I think, though, still that being said, I do think that he is a firm top 64 player. I think that he's going to go at worst in the second round, speaking about Foskey, because I think when you're talking about 6'4", 6'5", 255, 260 pounds with vines for arms and linear explosiveness, he's going to go high because at the end of the day, the NFL and every evaluator is going to bet on those traits because he has them. They're easy to see. At defensive end, as a pass rusher, those are eminently important. So someone's going to take a chance on the top 64, and I wouldn't blame him for wanting to be in that conversation. But when you talked about like, hey, maybe when we're talking about like, a couple of the other guys, like maybe, next year, maybe they're first, second round type of prospects, speaking about a couple of them. I do think that next year firmly that Foskey could be in that first round conversation. Like, you could sell me on him being a top 32 pick when I look at him play with the type of athleticism he has. So I would say I think that he should go back just because I do think that he is a first round caliber talent and caliber athlete, and it's a really deep defensive end edge class. So I would recommend him going back just because I think there's a big difference when we're talking about a first round caliber player comparative to a top 64.
Sure.
But ultimately, I do think that it could go either way. I'm not 100% sure on what the decision will be. I think that it's a true 50-50 split, but we will see what happens, obviously.
Yeah, it's for me, it's hard to separate the fan from the analyst, right? It is tough. It's tough. And of course I want to see Isaiah Foskey come back. There's no question about it. But I think he can help himself, and I think he can help himself by being in a weaker class. Anybody could. Any one of these guys that's in the class right now would help themselves by, if they had the opportunity to stick around and go to the 23 class, right? That's just common sense. So that's part of it. I still think he has an excellent defensive line coach. And so he's only going to get better. I don't think that he stagnates and stays at the same level. Right. And so coming back, he's going to learn more. He's going to get better with his hands. I think he gets better in run defense because we know he can rush the passer. We know he's excellent at that. I think he needs to get a little bit better in run defense. I think that's a part of his game that he can improve. I think he can improve dropping into coverage because he's asked to do that a lot as well. And depending on what kind of a scheme he gets drafted into, he might be asked to do that at the next level too. So I think there's things that he can work on for sure to kind of cement that first round draft pick status, because I think he can get there. I really do. I think he can be a first rounder if he gets to the point that I think he can get to next year at Notre Dame.
Well, let me ask you this, Vince. It's very simple. I mean, we just saw Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan, although he was dealing with an injury down the latter part of the 2020 season. Like, if he would have went out last year, he still would have been a top 64 selection. Like, he would have been a 2-round guy. What is the difference between the projection potentially, or the kind of the outlook as far as like how much better Foskey could be from this year to next? It could be a similar trajectory, because I don't think when you look at a guy like a Aiden Hutchinson, for instance, who has nuance to his hands, that has, obviously I put together a great season, but like if we're talking about them just standing next to each other, Foskey's a more physically gifted player. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. So what's stopping him from potentially rising to a top 15, top 20 player? I think it's very possible. And I think patience sometimes pays off. Now, there is a line, obviously, between hurting yourself going back and maybe not being as productive, or being injured, God forbid an injury happens. But I still do think that there's a lot more that Foskey can be at this level. And I think that we saw a lot of glimpses of it. He had ended like 12 or 13 sacks. Like, it was a great season.
Yeah, it was.
I still don't see why he can't be the Aiden Hutchinson of next year with how talented he is.
Well, and he's going to have a ton of opportunity against really good competition too. And I think that can only help things as well. I mean, he's going to go up against Ohio State. He's going to go up against Clemson, right? He's going to go up against a USC team that's going to throw the ball all over the yard. So he'll have some opportunities at some sack numbers there. So he's going to have these opportunities on, in this schedule with some high profile, a lot of eyeballs on TV where, look, that's how, Hutchinson got where he got, because he performed on the big stage, right? And I think, look, Notre Dame plays on a big stage anyway, but when you're opening things up at Ohio State and you've got Clemson, et cetera, you're going to have more of those opportunities in front of more eyeballs and things like that. And people can jump on the Isaiah Foskey bandwagon as well. And I think, in the past, you've got, he sent out a tweet, you got to do what's best for your family. 100%. Could not agree more. Sure. Right. But 10 years ago, that sounds different, because you're going from zero to whatever you're going to get in the NFL. And now you've got NIL and you've got some other opportunities where, you can help out your family a little bit, right, before you go to the NFL draft. And he's got his, his swag that he's been putting out there. And so he's got NIL deals. And I think, that's only going to get sweeter as his name gets out there even more. So again, from a fan standpoint, of course I want Isaiah Foskey back. Of course, right? From an analyst standpoint, I think there's things that he can work on where he will only improve his draft stock even more and become that first rounder, which I don't think he is right this moment. I don't think he goes in the first round.
No, and I would agree. I think that how is he going to test? I think he's going to test exceptionally well, so I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility. I mean, we saw, the kid from Washington last year, after sitting out the year, rise into being the 32nd selection to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's always possible, but I think firm second round prospect for Isaiah Foskey. And I think that he can, like you said, he can get a lot better, and the trajectory could be that much so that I think it might be worth sticking around for another year. And then also, fourth year as a player, in theory, we're going to graduate too, which is always a good thing to get in your back pocket. So. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, obviously that's the other piece as a dad and as a teacher. I mean, that's a piece that I love when these guys leave with a degree and all of that stuff too, because your future isn't guaranteed, right, on the football field. So that's always nice to have that in your back pocket.